Hi, I'm Amanda and welcome to Self. On this podcast, I share ideas, experiences, and have conversations to explore the self. By developing our own self-awareness, we can better show up for ourselves and those around us and hopefully all live happier and healthier lives. On today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience in my first competition ever in anything and some of my learnings and takeaways from it all. I'll start with a little bit of context about a freediving competition, just in case if most of you actually don't know anything about freediving, which is totally fine. So if you've watched a couple of the documentaries or movies and stuff, you might know a little bit, but essentially in a freediving competition, you've got two main categories. One is depth competition, one is a pool competition. Depth, it's pretty obvious, you are diving to a particular depth. And in the pool, we have two different kinds. We have a distance, which is done by using a monofin, bifins, or no fins. And then we also have a static competition where you're holding your breath, face down in the water, doing nothing. And you think doing nothing isn't hard, but that is absolutely, in my view, the most challenging of all the disciplines in freediving. So a couple of months ago, I was made aware of a upcoming competition in Brisbane. And since I'm currently based in Port Douglas, I was like, oh, maybe this is a good way for me to, get my toes wet and start competing. It's something that I've wanted to do for a little while, but have been apprehensive about. When I started thinking about the competition, a few things came up for me. The first thing was thinking, well, I need to be able to achieve X before I can compete. And that's something that has been in my mind for the last couple of years, is like, it's not worth competing if I'm such a shallow diver, or it's not worth competing if I can't actually do this much. It feels like a bit of a sham or something, I guess, because I've been surrounded by quite a lot of deeper divers and very experienced divers. So comparing myself to other people, I thought, well, it's not worth it for me to start that way. I also had this plan of joining a depth competition that gave out really good prizes for newcomers, and just thought I should make that my first competition because maybe I've got a high chance of winning stuff. But anyway, when I heard about this competition in Brisbane, I was pretty excited because I was thinking this is a great way for me to find out how I perform under pressure. And like I said, I'd had these, thoughts of, well, maybe I'm not good enough to compete, but I shifted my mind and started thinking, well, what's really the purpose of this comp? I know I'm not going to win, and that's totally fine. The purpose wasn't to go out and to win. The purpose is to explore how I feel, how I navigate a competition environment, what comes up for me, whether I can dive when I'm super nervous, whether I'm even going to be that nervous. I just had no idea because I grew up studying. I didn't grow up playing sports. I didn't grow up in a competition type environment that was healthy. I would have said that I was quite a competitive person, but that was more so because I felt the need to be the best because of my family pressure. So the competitiveness wasn't even necessarily competing with other people. It's just like, be perfect or die kind of thing. And so I didn't have much outside of, say, a school sports carnival. I didn't have an opportunity to explore this competitive environment, which can come with actually a big sense of support and stuff. So I told my friend that I would join the comp, and I started getting really excited about it. And in that time, I could feel myself going into a couple of different mindsets. On the one hand, it was almost like preparing myself for failure and going, well, if I just don't, put too much emphasis on training or anything. Essentially, if I don't try, then maybe it'll be okay to fail or to, not do as well. So it was almost preempting myself not succeeding and then trying to justify it by being a bit lazy towards training or something. And the other thing, I guess, where that's rooted in is just coming back to that fear of failure. I think what I was afraid of is if I try really hard and I don't do well, then that would really suck. And that was just something I realized and acknowledged. And I was like, well, do you want to be someone who tries their best, or do you want to be someone who doesn't and then not find out kind of what you're really made of? So there was an active decision to go, no, well, I do want to try. And I don't have time to really dedicate myself to completely training properly, but I did make time to do some bigger swims at the pool so that I could make sure I was feeling confident and good about myself. And something I incorporated during my dive was some mantras while I'm underwater. So if you're not someone who has partaken in any freediving fun, when you hold your breath, your mind kind of starts to spin out a little bit. It's like, what are you doing? You need to breathe. And there's a lot of negative thinking that can come into the mind. And so in my training, something that I started very consciously doing was giving myself a lot of positive encouragement throughout all my diving all the time. It was this balance of reminding myself to relax, that I was safe, and that I've got this, that I've got the ability to do this, that I'm well within my capabilities, because I always was. And I made sure that every time I was in the pool and training, I wasn't kind of pushing myself to a point of failure. That was important for me because I've got a lot of different, water stuff. If you listen to the panic attack in the water episode, then you'll know a bit about that. So I wanted to keep reinforcing this positive loop. So I have different mantras when I'm underwater, and one of them was like, I am the blue rocket, because I wear this blue wetsuit. And just before the comp, I think about a couple of weeks before that, I was feeling super fatigued and lethargic. I was on my period. I think it was the second day, so feeling bloated and heavy. And I decided to jump in the pool and do a 100-meter swim with bifins. So that's obviously on breath hold underneath. And what I told myself is, if I know that I can do, a couple of my warm-ups and then do this 100 and a turn at the wall, then I will have the confidence in myself. I know that I can tell myself then, no matter how I'm feeling on the day, that's really the minimum benchmark. And I've trained up until this point, so I knew that I was very capable of it. And so that's what I did. And the swim felt great, even though I wasn't feeling all that crash hot. It was a good dive, and it allowed me to feel prepared within myself. And that was important. I think often we approach a lot of things with this fear of all of this unknown. And I could have looked at the competition as like, oh, but I don't know. But the truth is, the time that I had invested in the pool meant that I did know. Even if that fear existed of failing, of not being able to do it, the truth is I'd prepared for it all. And that was all I needed to truly know. The truth, different to the insecurities and the different fears coming up, the truth was and is that even on my worst day, I have 100 meters and a turn in me. And that gave me a great sense of confidence. So I flew to Brisbane and went to the pool to check it out. It was a 2-day competition. So the first day You could do a dynamic discipline, which means you could pick between monofin, bifins, or no fins. I chose bifins, and then the second day was the static breath hold that I told you about earlier. Now, statics are I don't want to say my nemesis, that sounds harsh, but definitely not my best friend. Statics and I are acquainted, but we are not all that familiar, and I find them quite challenging. They've gotten better as I have more control about my wandering and very loud, crazy mind. But they are challenging, just holding your breath and kind of being there still with yourself and trying to relax through that is hard. So I went with my friend Geordie to the pool, and she was fantastic in coaching me through the dives. And then it came towards a competition, and I remember 2 days before the comp, I was feeling really nervous. I was this mixture of excited and a bundle of nerves, just because I guess I didn't know what to expect of myself. I started doubting myself a little bit more again, and I just had to come back to that assurance I had in, hey, on any day, on your worst day, you've got 100 and a turn in you. It's okay. And having to soothe myself, to be there to support myself, was super valuable. I have been someone who, for so much of my life, I needed validation externally from others. Like, I needed others to tell me that I would be okay. But this was really a time for me to come through for myself. That when I was sitting there with those nerves, of course, as much as other people were telling me I'd do great as well, honestly, the thing that mattered most was that I knew in my heart that I was going to give it my best shot and that I was going to enjoy my dives. And that was the goal. It was to go along to this competition, to see how nerves would impact my freediving, and to just have fun, to enjoy the dives, to come up really clean, and to get white cards. So a little bit of context there is, in a freediving comp, you come up for this organisation, AIDA, for this competition. When you surface, you have 15 seconds to remove any facial equipment, then give the okay sign and say the words, "I'm okay." And it has to be done in that order. Following that, you then have to keep your chin, your head, your airways, out of the water for another 15 seconds. And if that's all good, then you get a white card. If you turn early, like if you have an announced performance and you do less than your announced performance, but you have a clean dive, then you get a yellow card, and then you get disqualified if you're assisted by the safety team. If you black out or have a hypoxic event underwater, for example, and safety need to intervene, or you mess up your surface protocol, then you get a red card. So yeah, my goal was 2 white cards in both events and just have fun. So competition day comes around, and getting my start times, which were after midday, the thing I was most nervous about was actually being really hungry. No surprises there. And I get to the pool, do registration, and I can feel this mixture of kind of excitement. You feel some of the nerves as well. And I just kept coming back to the fact that it's just another dive. It's something that I've done before. I've prepared for this and I'm capable. I get in the water on this first day, and it's my bifins dive that I start with. And I do actually, before I say that, I remember after my warm-ups going over into the lane and preparing before my dive. My heart rate was pretty high. So in freediving, we want to keep our heart rate low because it consumes less oxygen. So you want to be calm and relaxed. You don't want the adrenaline of a comp environment that traditionally you might embrace in other sports. So I stood there focusing on my breathing, And that allowed me to be present. You know, all these things that I talk about, I genuinely try to practice as much as possible. I closed my eyes and focused on nasal breathing and just brought everything back to that moment where I was, feeling the water on my hands, on my feet, feeling my bifins, and just going, this is another dive. And yeah, we get a countdown because you have to start on time. So I got the countdown, and I remember listening to the countdown and feeling my heart rate kind of start to increase again. And when I started my dive, I could feel my heart beating faster and stronger than usual. And I was diving a little bit faster. So I told myself to calm myself, to relax a little bit more, to just focus on that first stage of the dive, which is that first 50 meters, get to the wall and turn. And so I broke up this dive so that there wasn't all this pressure of like having to complete all of these things. It was just, let's take one step at a time. And that's kind of my approach to life generally. It's just one thing at a time. We might see where the end goal is. We might see the full picture, but we don't have to come running at it, looking straight at it. You know, I think that can be overwhelming sometimes. And so the first thing is just to go, where is that first marker I need to make it to? Like, where is that first checkpoint? And let's get there and then check in, and then we can keep going to the next one. So my first checkpoint was the 50-meter wall. So I get to 50, I do a turn, and I'm feeling great. I'm like, this is an easy dive. I know I'm diving a little bit faster, and that's okay. Let's just focus on relaxing, keeping a good pace, steady rhythm. And that's what I did. And I was like, okay, the next checkpoint is the 100-meter wall. And I get there. And the game plan for this dive was I'd get to 100, turn, and if I was feeling terrible, then I could turn and then just come up. Because I know, you know what I said to you, on the worst day I can do 100 and a turn. But if I was feeling good and I could explore for a bit more, then just go for a little bit longer, count to 10, and if I was feeling good, go a little bit further. But I did tell Geordie that I was going to come up at most like 125. My PB at that point was 120. So I'm diving, I'm finning along, and then the 100-meter point comes. I touch, turn, and then I take a moment to check back in. And that's really important. You know, that taking a moment to go, hey, while I'm here, you know, going towards the goal and I might be able to see it, maybe I just need to check in with myself and make sure that I'm still feeling good for this. Do I need to pause? Do I need to stop? Do I need to come up? And I was really honest with myself, and I'm like, I feel so good. This dive feels great. I'm okay. So let's keep going and let's just put in a bit of extra work. And so I really stuck to that game plan. I kept going. I saw the 15-meter mark on the ground and I was like, I'm still feeling okay. So let's go to 125. And I saw a mark, but it was actually like a line before the 125 that I didn't know. So I saw it and I was like, this split decision, or a part of me, the very ambitious, driven, ego part of me, which is not a bad thing, was like, let's keep going. Like, you've got more in you. And then the other part was like, we said 125. And it was just this split decision of like, stick to the game plan, Amanda. So I came up, I did my surface protocol. It was excellent, super clean, really easy dive, big smile on my face, and I got my first white card. And the valuable lesson there for me was the importance sometimes of, even when the opportunity arises to push, that we don't always have to take it. It's very likely that if I'd continued for, say, an extra 10 meters, I would have been completely fine. But there's also a chance that perhaps if I'd continued for 10 meters, that I may have been on the verge of hypoxia. Maybe it wouldn't have been so clean. Perhaps for me, from like a mental perspective, being able to come up and only need to do a couple of recovery breaths and feel really good and really confident, the boost that dive gave me has been incredible. Like knowing that I've got so much more to give on that dive, that I've got so much more in me, has been very positive and reinforcing my own belief within myself. So that was really good decision making, Amanda. I'm stoked with myself for sticking to that. And feeling really good, celebrated that. And the next day was the statics. And I had 3 warm-ups, and when I moved into the lane for my dive, I was told I only had 3 minutes before my dive. So straight away I was like, oh, that's not enough time to fully relax. Like I actually had planned to have 6 minutes, but some of my warm-ups went over and, got caught up. We just like lost a bit of time. So rather than kind of freaking out and worrying about it, I was like, all right, we stick to the game plan. Same thing, 3 minutes is fine. It might be a little bit more challenging, but you'll be okay. Like, that you've got this in you. So I did the dive. And look, it wasn't the worst dive. It wasn't the best dive either, but it certainly was not really, really challenging as I thought it would be. And it's less than what I'm capable of doing, but that's okay, because it was really, again, about the game plan, which was 3 minutes 30, and if I feel good, then just add on a few extra seconds. And so I ended up doing a 3 minute 37 hold. And the feeling of getting a second white card, again, reinforced my own abilities to myself. And I guess if you kind of apply this to some bigger things, realizing that we need a lot of positive reinforcement to remind ourselves of our abilities and what we're able to do. Positive feedback is extremely valuable to everyone, particularly if it's to do something that you find challenging, particularly if it's an area where you want to push yourself. I think it's important to explore that comfort zone into discomfort, but reinforcing an ability to do that. You just don't need to take to a point where you have negative associations to things, because ultimately that kind of sends your nervous system into a bit of chaos, kind of freaks you out. And so that was my approach to the competition, which I'm stoked about. Something else actually that happened during the comp is David, my partner's dad, came to watch my dive on the first day. And it's funny how our childlike parts can come out at different points in time. And when David, the day before, he'd said to me, my dad's going to be up in Brisbane. I'm going to have a chat with him on the phone, and I'm pretty sure he's going to ask to come to see your dive. What do you think? And my child self, the one who always longed to have my parents a part of things with me, was so overjoyed. And I told him that. I was like, really? That would make me so happy. My parents only ever came along to my year 7 graduation and my year 12 graduation. So I would often see a lot of my friends' parents at school carnivals, at some of the productions that we put on, at assemblies, at all of these things. If we got merit certificates and stuff, usually parents would come along. And I just didn't have that. My parents were working a lot. Also, I don't think they were really interested and wanted to come along to things like that, or parent-teacher interviews and stuff. And perhaps as an adult, maybe as a kid, I kind of put that to a side because I knew that nothing would change and I accepted it and it was okay. But it's funny that at 33 years old, having a dad, well, my partner's dad, say that he wanted to come along and watch me, I really felt a deep sense of joy, and I could feel, little kid Amanda being like, yay, I feel so supported. I feel loved through this. And it was such a great feeling to come up from my dive and to see him there, because he made it in to see me standing there preparing for my dive. So obviously he wasn't going to say anything. And he watched my entire dive, and he came and I introduced him to some of our friends and stuff. And it was such a beautiful moment and a reminder that we're not meant to go through life alone. We're not meant to have all of these achievements and this success on our own. We like to share them with people. We like having people support us, and that's a normal thing. I think for so much of my life, I thought that I just needed to depend on myself to some degree. And I think a lot of people end up telling themselves that, maybe we tell ourselves like, I don't really need anyone, like I'll be fine. I don't need support or encouragement from particular people. But the truth is, we're social creatures. Successes are so much more special when we get to share them with people who genuinely are rooting for our very best. And it was a beautiful reminder of that through having David's dad there, but also through the community that I'd met. I met all these new divers, and just seeing the way that everyone was encouraging one another was such a beautiful thing. And I loved every bit of it. It's been quite an experience that's just taken me up on a high, so I'm stoked about that. And these are just some of the lessons I guess I learned. It's exciting for me because I will be joining more competitions. The thing that I learned, by the way, about myself and nerves, because actually that's what I wanted to know, right? I wanted to know, can I perform under pressure? See, I have always known where I can perform under pressure is like academically. I've often had times when, deadlines are right there and I haven't worked on stuff. I was like quite bad at procrastinating certain projects if I didn't enjoy them and stuff, and I would leave them right until the last minute and they'd be due the next day, and somehow I would bust out a long essay or whatever it is that was due. I would bust it out in like 6 hours and get it done. C's get degrees, so I didn't really care about the grade. So I've always known that I can perform under pressure in that way. I know that I can perform under pressure when it's like a super tight window to make decisions and I just need to focus in and kind of go tunnel vision, dial into something and make shit happen. Like I think when a bunch of things are going wrong, I'm someone who can go, all right, this is what we need to do. So I've known that. I think that comes from growing up in a bit of a chaotic home and feeling an extreme sense of obligation to make some quick calls when there's like conflict and some chaos going on in the house. So all of that, I suppose, like shaped me, so I'm able to make those decisions under pressure and stay really calm. It's like when my sympathetic nervous system is activated, I am able to think quite clearly, even if my heart rate's like really high and stuff. There's a certain level, there's a certain point where after that I might get a bit flustered, but for the most part I'm all right, let's go. So yeah, what I did find out is in the comp I'm actually able to perform under pressure pretty well. You know, it was just getting those nerves together, calming down. Heart rate was a bit high, but for the most part I was able to focus on the task at hand. And looks like maybe I can get shit done after all, even when it's in a freediving comp environment. So yeah, that is a little bit about my experience and what I've learned. I hope that through sharing that with you that, I don't know, maybe it encourages you to try something like competitive freediving or competitive sports in some way. Let me know if it does. I'm excited to hear about that. This is definitely not my last competition. I am really stoked and excited to do another one and just see how I go. And hopefully they all feel as good as this one. You know, good, clean, easy dives. I think that was a great approach. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening. As always, you can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. You can watch it on YouTube. If you are there, please rate and review the show. Please subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, all of the good stuff. You know what to do. You can also follow the show, of course, on Instagram at self_podcast and at Amanda Letran. That's Amanda Letran. I have a Patreon account if you want to, give me some cash that way. You don't have to. Obviously, you will always be able to access the show for free. It's not a problem. Yes, and that's really it. I release episodes every Thursday. Thanks again for listening. I will see you next week. Bye.